What happens when Hollywood icon Sylvester Stallone sits down for what should be a simple promotional interview, only to find himself facing a host intent on tearing him apart? What you're about to see is one of the most startling live TV moments ever recorded, where a beloved action star reaches his limit and releases decades of frustration in front of millions of viewers. Before we get into this intense story, make sure to hit subscribe and tell me in the comments what you think really sparked this explosive clash. The morning began like any other at the View studio in Manhattan. Sylvester Stallone arrived early, his professional attitude unchanged as he prepared for what his publicist promised. It would be a friendly conversation about his latest project. The actor, still in his 70s and holding on to the physique that made him famous, sat in the makeup chair while assistants moved around him. Finishing his look for the cameras, "Mr. Stallone, we're so excited to have you today," one production assistant chirped. "The ladies can't wait to talk with you about your new film and your amazing career." Stallone nodded politely, his gravelly voice quiet as he replied, "Yeah, should be good. Always happy to talk about the work." But as time moved closer to showtime, there was a different kind of energy in the air. Joy Behar had been unusually fired up during the pre-show meeting, making comments to her co-hosts with a tone that hadn't shown up with other guests that week. "I've got some real questions for Rocky today," she said with a smirk the others couldn't quite read. Time someone asked the tough stuff instead of letting these guys coast on old movies. When the cameras came on and the View's familiar theme played, everything looked normal. The co-hosts took their seats around the famous table, with Joy settling and holding a thick folder of notes. It's far more material than she usually brought for celebrity guests. "Welcome back to The View," Joy announced with her perfect TV smile. "We're here with the one and only Sylvester Stallone, star of Rocky, Rambo, and so many action films that have entertained audiences for decades. Sly, welcome to the show." Stallone leaned forward slightly, hands clasped together. "Thanks for having me, Joy. Great to be here with all you ladies." "So let's talk about your new project," Joy began, but her tone wasn't her usual warm style. "You're still making action movies at your age. Don't you think it's time to step aside and let younger actors take these roles?" The question hit hard. Even Whoopi Goldberg shifted in her seat while Sarah N. glanced toward producers off camera. This wasn't what they planned. Stallone kept his expression calm, though there was a slight tension in his eyes. "Well, Joy, as long as audiences want these stories and I'm physically able to tell them, age is just a number." Clint Eastwood was still making westerns into his 80s. "But Clint Eastwood is Clint Eastwood," Joy snapped back, sharper now. "And let's be honest, your recent films haven't exactly dominated the box office. Isn't this more about ego than audience demand?" Applause died instantly. Stallone's jaw tightened, but he stayed composed. "The numbers speak for themselves," he said evenly. "The Expendables franchise has done well. Creed brought Rocky to a new generation, and people still care about these characters. I'm not making movies for ego. I'm making them because the stories are worth telling." Joy flipped through her notes dramatically. "Speaking of Creed, wasn't that really Michael B. Jordan's movie? You were mainly there for nostalgia, right? Playing the same character you created 40 years ago." Joy. Whoopi tried to step in, clearly attempting to steer things back. "I think we're all wondering how Sly keeps himself in such amazing shape for these demanding roles." But Joy ignored her completely. She was locked in, and something in her attitude suggested this had turned personal. "No, I want his thoughts on this," she pushed. "Hollywood has this issue with aging male stars who can't accept that their time is over. They keep returning to the same roles instead of making space for new talent." Stallone's hands tightened together. His voice stayed calm, but there was a different tone now, one viewers hadn't heard before. "Joy, I don't know what you're getting at, but I've spent 5 decades creating characters that matter to people. Rocky Balboa isn't just a movie character to many. He's a symbol of fighting through challenges. If that still connects with audiences, I don't see why I should apologize for continuing those stories. But isn't it really about the money? Joy pressed, ignoring the rising tension. These franchises are cash cows, and you're milking them for every dollar, whether the stories are worth telling or not. The other co-hosts exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the interview anyone expected. And the crew behind the cameras began scrambling as things shifted from promotion to confrontation. Stallone drew a slow breath. Leaning on years of press experience to navigate what had become a hostile exchange. "Everyone is entitled to their opinion," he said. "But I think you're underestimating what these characters mean to audiences across generations." "Do they, though?" Joy fired back instantly. "Or is it just Hollywood's old boys club protecting its own, approving projects based on connections rather than the quality of the work?" The accusation lingered in the air like a toxic fog. Stallone's expression changed noticeably for the first time since the interview began. The professional facade slipped just enough to reveal a flash of something far deeper and far more intense. "Excuse me?" Stallone's voice dropped into the lower register that had made him famous for portraying men who never backed down. "What exactly are you suggesting, Joy?" Joy recognized she'd struck a nerve, and instead of easing off, she leaned forward with a look that could only be described as predatory satisfaction. "I'm not implying anything, Sly. I'm saying it outright. Hollywood runs on favors, and relationships. Actors like you have benefited from that system for decades, while new, more diverse talent gets pushed aside." The other hosts were now visibly uneasy. Sarah N. stared at her notes, clearly wishing she could vanish, while Alyssa Farrah Griffin kept darting looks toward the producers, silently begging them to intervene. Even the usually unshakable Whoopi Goldberg looked like she might crawl under the table. "Joy, maybe we should shift to talking about Sly's charity work," Whoopi suggested. Her voice sharp with warning, but Joy was determined not to change course. "No. This matters," Joy continued, her voice rising. "We constantly discuss representation and making space for underrepresented voices. Yet we celebrate actors who keep occupying space that could go to someone else." Stallone's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the cameras captured something viewers would replay endlessly in the weeks ahead. It was the expression of a man who had fought his whole life to be seen, who clawed his way up from nothing, and who would not sit quietly while someone questioned his right to exist in his own profession. "Let me explain something to you, Joy," Stallone said, steady voice layered with barely controlled intensity. "Nothing was handed to me. I wrote Rocky because no one would give me a chance. I sold my dog to make rent while trying to get that script made. When the studios wanted to buy it, they wanted to cast someone else, someone who fit their idea of a leading man. But that was 50 years ago," Joy cut in, seemingly blind to the warning signs everyone else clearly saw. "What have you done lately besides recycling the same role over and over?" The studio audience was now completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, fully aware they were capturing a moment that would be talked about for years. Stallone released his grip on the table and leaned back, his posture shifting from defensive to something far more dangerous. "What have I done lately? I've created opportunities for dozens of actors through The Expendables. I've mentored young filmmakers. I've used my platform to tell stories about working-class fighters who refuse to surrender. All starring you, of course," Joy scoffed with a hard laugh. "How convenient that every opportunity revolves around keeping Sylvester Stallone front and center." That was the moment. Anyone could see it the exact second. Decades of frustration hardened into something explosive. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but filled with a fury that made the entire room feel smaller. "You know what, Joy? I've been sitting here trying to be respectful, trying to play the game. But it's pretty clear you've got a personal problem with me that has nothing to do with movies or representation or any of those noble causes you're pretending to defend. Joy's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected him to hit back so directly. I don't have a personal issue with you. I'm just asking tough questions. No, Stallone said, his voice growing stronger. You're making accusations. You're treating me like some outdated relic who should disappear so you can feel more righteous about whatever message you're pushing this week. I don't have an agenda. Joy argued, but her tone no longer carried the same confidence. Really? Stallone leaned in, staring straight at her. Because from where I'm sitting, sounds like you've got a problem with people who came from nothing and built something that lasted. It sounds like you think anyone who's been successful for longer than 5 minutes should step aside to make room for whoever you've decided deserves it more. The studio tension was now so thick it could be seen. The other co-hosts had abandoned any attempt to join the conversation, simply watching in stunned silence as two dominant personalities collided live on air. That's not what I said. Joy tried again. But now her voice was defensive. It's exactly what you said, Stallone shot back. You questioned my right to work. You questioned my motives. You painted me as some greedy obstacle standing in the way of others all, while acting like you're the judge of who deserves success. Joy straightened up, trying to reclaim her earlier boldness. Look, Sly, I think you're being oversensitive. I'm just saying Hollywood has a diversity problem, and actors from your era might need to step back to make room for new voices. But Stallone was done defending himself. Something had shifted, and the cameras were capturing a defining moment in live TV history. Oversensitive, he repeated, his voice rising for the first time. Oversensitive is using a national platform to ambush a guest who came here to talk about their work, then calling it social commentary. They're not personal attacks, Joy insisted. Clearly shaken now. Then, what would you call it? Stallone challenged. Because for the last 10 minutes, you said, I'm too old, too greedy. Stealing opportunities from others, and responsible for some systemic problem in Hollywood. If that's not personal, I'd hate to see where your line actually is. The audience remained utterly silent, spellbound by what they were witnessing. This wasn't a polished celebrity interview. This was raw conflict, unfiltered. Between two people who clearly saw the world very differently. Joy realized she had gone to Behar, but instead of backing down, she doubled down, making an even bigger mistake. Look, Sly, Joy said, waving her hand dismissively. Maybe this is just what happens when people get older and more sensitive. You can't take criticism the way you used to. Maybe that's another signal it's time to step back. The words hit the studio like a lightning bolt. The other co-hosts pulled back in their seats, and even the camera operators seemed to retreat. Joy had stepped over a line that everyone knew would have repercussions. Stallone froze, his expression shifting through emotions even his years of acting couldn't hide. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and sharp. Did you just call me old and weak on national television? Joy, realizing she'd crossed too far but unable to escape gracefully, forced out a thin, awkward laugh. I'm just saying maybe you're not handling constructive criticism the way you used to. That was enough. Stallone shot up from his chair faster than anyone expected, slamming his hands on the table so hard it echoed like a gunshot through the studio. When he spoke, it was a roar built from a breaking point long overdue. Constructive criticism. Are you serious right now? You think what you've been doing for 15 minutes is constructive criticism? The audience gasped. Some in the front row literally jumped. The cameras kept rolling, capturing what would soon become one of the most replayed clips in television history. Joy, you want to talk age and sensitivity? Stallone pressed on. Here's something about age. I'm 77 years old. I've been in this industry longer than you've known what a TV camera is. I've taken real criticism, real rejection, real hits, more than you could imagine, even in your worst dreams. Joy tried to cut in, but Stallone refused to let her, double quotes, no. You had your 15 minutes to drag me down. Now you're going to sit and listen while I tell you what I think of your so-called journalism. The host sat frozen, unsure whether to step in or stay still. Whoopi half raised her hand to her earpiece, obviously receiving frantic messages from control, but even she couldn't move. You want to talk about taking opportunities away from people? Stallone continued, his voice climbing. What about the opportunity you just stole from your viewers, the chance to learn something real about filmmaking, storytelling, about making characters that endure for generations? Instead, you turned this into a personal attack disguised as social justice. Sly, you need to calm down, Joy said, her voice shaking. Calm down. Stallone barked out a cold, bitter laugh. You spend 20 minutes trying to humiliate me on live TV, questioning my integrity, my work ethic, my right to exist in the industry, and now you tell me to calm down. Who do you think you are? The studio fell silent enough to hear the soft hum of cameras. Even the crew had stopped moving, glued to the moment. I've been Rocky Balboa for 50 years, Stallone said, his frustration weighing every word. Do you understand what that means? 50 years of being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, or wasn't the right type. 50 years proving them wrong, and now you sit there in your comfortable chair with your comfortable job and think you can erase all of that because it fits your narrative. Joy tried to speak again, but Stallone lifted a hand, stopping her instantly. You want to talk diversity and representation? Fine. Let's tell the truth. When I wrote Rocky, I was a broke actor from Philadelphia who couldn't even get arrested in this town. Studios wanted to buy my script and cast a big-name actor. I said no. I fought 2 years to play the character I created. They said I was crazy, that I'd never work again. His voice surged with years of buried emotion. But I believed in that character, and I believed working-class people deserved to see themselves as heroes. That's diversity, Joy. That's representation. Rocky wasn't a privileged pretty boy. He was a nobody from South Philly who refused to stay down. But that was then, Joy muttered weakly. No, that's today. That's every day, Stallone exploded. You think success made me forget where I came from? You think I don't know what it feels like to be counted out? To be told you don't belong? To have someone like you judge whether you deserve the opportunities you've spent your whole life earning? The cameras caught every second. The anger, the hurt beneath it. A legend fighting for his dignity in real time. And here's the sad part, he went on. You had a chance today to have a real conversation about storytelling, perseverance, about building something that lasts. Instead, you used your platform to destroy someone. That says more about you than me. Stallone straightened his jacket and stared into the camera. To everyone watching, I came here to talk about work I love, stories and characters that have meant something to people for decades. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks success is something to be ashamed of instead of earned. He looked back at Joy, voice now icy calm. You want to talk about making room for new talent? I've helped launch countless actors, directors, writers. I've fought to get projects greenlit. I've spent my own money to support young artists. I believe in giving people a chance. Joy sat silent, truly realizing how badly she had misjudged the moment. But none of that matters to you, Stallone said. What matters is pretending you're a crusader, taking down the establishment. Even if that establishment is just a guy who came from nothing and worked his butt off to build something that matters. He stood, removing his microphone carefully. I'm done. This isn't journalism, it's ambush TV. And I'm not going to sit here and take it. He walked off the set. The studio stayed frozen, cameras rolling, capturing Joy's stunned face and the other hosts squirming in discomfort. What began as a simple promotional interview became something far larger. A moment that would be dissected for years. For those explosive minutes, viewers saw something rare. A guest completely dismantling a host who went too far. If you enjoyed this dramatic moment where politeness finally snapped, hit subscribe and tell me, did Joy cross the line? Or did Stallone overreact to fair questions?